I'd like to open the session today by talking about what's happening right now in the continuous improvement space in the current crisis. What are we seeing there? Some companies kept their continuous improvement resource and some have cut them. Let's start with Susan.
Thank you, Wendy, and thanks for introducing our panel this evening or this afternoon. We wanted to talk about what the current reality is and then move into the consequences of that and then some tips for how to deal with it. What we've seen is a variety of things, and the group on this call today is going to share that with you. In particular, when this whole COVID urgent situation started, you saw a rush to cash, to preserve cash in many corporations, and often that meant that CI people were the first group to be let go because they don't have an obvious touch to product or finance reporting. They're often on the list of the first group that completely gets furloughed or laid off. So what happened in many companies is those people with disciplined approach to program and project management and fixing things was put on furlough, which leaves a lot of people left with not necessarily the expertise to solve critical problems.
Great, Susan. How about you, Fidel? What are you seeing?
So I'm a numbers guy, right? So during the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, roughly 9 million people unfortunately lost their jobs, mostly through layoffs. Now, cut to today's climate, over 30 million people have lost their jobs either through a layoff or have been asked to take unpaid leave. So the reality today is that most industries have embraced the F word. So what do I mean? Furloughs are a way to spread the pain. They allow a business long-run efficiency and profitability. But the issue is that meanwhile, those that stayed behind on the job are asked to either take a pay cut, do more work, and forego bonuses. So that's kind of like what we're seeing today.
And how about you, David? What are you seeing in the current environment?
Well, much like what Fidel was saying, I mean, you're seeing some industries, I mean, it's revealing weaknesses, and it's a cash and it's a numbers business for most businesses. But I would say in some areas where there's more high risk or security needs, so say a defense contractor or those types of industries, you're seeing that they're actually keeping some of the folks that are the continuous improvement, project management, the structured folks, because they see that, I mean, these are folks that see the whole business and kind of can see where the skeletons were anyway. And so they're kind of focusing more efforts on kind of stopping the bleeding first and then making sure that it's still aligned so that there's some structure going forward. So that's what I would say.
Okay, thanks, David. And finally, how about you, Layla?
I appreciate all those comments because it is a hard reality out there. I'm coming from an industry currently in oil and gas that's kind of a mixed bag, right? I mean, Chevron's announced a 10 to 15% layoff. That's about out of their 45,000 employees. You got BP that announced another 10,000 this month that they're going to be laying off. That's about 15%. But yet, on the other hand, they're also holding on to their process improvement, their safety process people. So it's kind of a mixed bag here. The layoffs are happening in the whole industries, and yet there's still some importance to those of us that are related to process safety, process improvement, directly related to risk. And I think David kind of alluded to it. There's some industries that can't just let these people go because then that means safety is not important and numbers are more important. Just as suffering as anybody else. So the reality is you got a mixed bag out there. We're letting people go, but they're still also holding on to those risk and analysts out there. So that's what I'm seeing going on.
Great, thanks, Layla. So I'd like to present this question to Susan and then Fidel. What do you see are the consequences of losing the continuous improvement and project management people? What are the consequences and what happens to the people left behind?
Well, what I'm seeing is that specifically those organizations that let their CI and their discipline program managers go actually bring them back first, because as the rest of the organization is struggling to cope with a lot of change, whether that's volume all of a sudden decreasing or increasing rapidly. They're struggling. They have to focus on just getting the product out or providing the service. And they need those CI people and the program management group to make sure that they're doing it safely and strategically in a way that's communicated effectively to the rest of the organization. So although they might have been the first to let go, they're also the first to come back.
And so David and Layla are in industries where they keep the people. So talk about that, the benefits of that, you know, to starting with you, Layla.
Let me first say there's a bit of survivor's guilt feeling too, right? Because you are seeing your colleagues let go, and yet your area or your department has been named as critical or required because, you know, we got to keep operating safely. We're in a life or death type industry. So that's the first morale impact. That's kind of what Fidel's talking about. There's that feeling of, you know, I got to stay simply because I happen to be in a role deemed important. That doesn't mean all those other ones were not. And that's the first struggle. The second kind of consequence in that organization is I got to keep working. I got to get people motivated to try to fix and improve and keep looking at themselves while everybody. And so we have people that are concerned with their families at home in the pandemic, their kids, the schools are shut down. And meanwhile, we still have to operate safely. So keeping that methodology rigor is very important. So consequences, you got to maintain that discipline of that this process works. That's why the company held you there. And you got to instill that thinking into everybody that's left, saying, we're here to make things work better, safer for the long term. And you got to try to keep that momentum going. The consequences, it's a difficult thing to do, right? That impact is not something that happens easily, but very important to keep going. So that's my perspective.
Thanks, Layla. How about you, David? What do you see as the consequences?
I mean, some consequences, I mean, there's the negative consequences. There's actually some positive ones too. I know when I was at a defense contractor back in the recession, 2008, it kind of galvanized us as a team. And so the CI folks and the program managers, and me in particular, I was doing cost account management at the time. And so I cared about cash, and we didn't have as many people that we had to deal with. But it kind of was like a foxhole mentality. And so it's kind of like, okay, what's the next thing we're going to do? What's the next thing we're going to do? And I think with the structure and the fact that they left people behind that are experts in that, they were able to navigate and kind of wear the different hats and know how to do things like 5 whys and just quick root cause stuff that we're trained in. And so it's very structured. And so when people were having anxious times, you learn that as a facilitator. You know how to deal with different separating the message from the messenger type of thing. And those are things that there's a reason why you have training and you have expertise in these areas. I mean, it's because you're an expert in that. And so they tended to lean on those folks more. And then coming out, the consequences, a lot of those folks moved into different jobs where they basically took over some of the areas that nobody even knew they had expertise in. So some benefits do come out of it. I think as with anything, the cream rises to the top.